Hi everyone, I'm back at it again. I see there's more connections that I have to let you guys in on, and this whole thing about the swan and the goose that I did in my last video with regards to Melania's commercial with Affleck, when she was like made to look like she got turned into a goose, and then also with the swan representation for Trump. I'm going to go into the mythology of the swan, and then I'm also going to look at the sky in this fall, because I previously mentioned there's like two dates where they're tying to Osiris and his resurrection, and that was October 17th or October like 28th. So I'm trying to decipher in the sky which time frame would be more realistic according to the planets. So I want to go into that. And then I also want to go into looking at the founding date of the United States again a little bit more closely. So that's what this video is going to be about, and I hope you guys stick with me. And I also want to thank everybody for sending me little breadcrumbs and clues, and it's definitely helpful because I start to see how everything's still interconnecting with this whole story that we're in, this wonderful movie that we're watching. So the swan and the goose. This all ties into Leda, who gave birth to two sets of twins. And the one pair of twins ties to Castor and Pollux, and the other was Helen de Sparta and her sister Clytemnestra. The swan goose is also sacred to Apollo, Dionysus, and Hermes, and Eros. Apollo was known for the swan chariot pulling him. And then also the island upon which the divine twins Artemis and Apollo were born were reputedly surrounded by swans before the birth. There's imagery connected to Artemis with swans as well, where she stands winged in her pose as mistress of the animals, flanked by two swans. The Norse god Freya was also said to have a chariot drawn by swans. The symbolism of the swan and the goose explains that the original and primary symbolic function of the goose, and perhaps also the swan, was an emblem of representation of the sun and the male principle. However, swans and geese were often also connected to goddesses as well. Aphrodite and her Roman counterpart Venus was linked to swans as symbols of sexuality, love, and devotions. Swans mate for life, and both males and females play a role in caring for their offspring. The Egyptian goddess Isis, like her father Geb, was also associated with geese and possibly swans as well. Geese were a common sacrifice to the Egyptian gods as symbol of both the earth and world creation. The swan, which is called Éla in Scots Gaelic, Éla in Irish, and Alarc in Welsh, Alarc in Britain, Ola in Manx, and Arg Cornish, is known for the majestic grace and gliding mystical beauty. Little wonder that then these birds of the family Anatidae within the genus Cygnus are associated with the gods and goddesses of the pre-Christian Celtic people. So so it's all to do with the Celt worship. And this swan species are the whopper, the trumpeter, and the tundra, and mute, black-necked, black and Berwick. Now it's interesting when Princess Diana, her burial ground or her spot where they go to worship her. I did a video on this a long time ago, about a year ago. She's buried in a mirrored-shaped lake with an island in the center of it, and they put all black swans in the lake and then planted rows and rows of oak trees all around it. So this is a Celtic worship. Okay, so it's not just trying to really bring home the importance of the swan and the goose. in ancient history. Princess Diana, at her funeral, they mentioned the goddess Diana, which is really similar to Artemis, right? It's all to do with moon worship, and swans, and oak trees, and lakes. So it's also tying into the Danann. Okay, so these are the mythical beings of Irish lore that are like kind of like the elven people, right? So this whole mythology that goes into the children of the Lear. Yeah, there was also, they were changed into swans. So this is a Manx folklore, and this is all tying to this transformation of them going back and forth from this mystical being to a human. So this is ancient, it's like over 900 years old. They say they're going to return, or 900, there's this whole mathematical equation of when they're going to return. But it's really ascended souls, right? These ascended souls are able to change. They're you could call them changelings, or you're able to transmute from one form to another. And I think they're the extended souls, that they're able to jump in and out of timelines. And you see this in all the mythology of the Titan movies. So in 1975, just north of Copenhagen, they found a burial, swan burial, with a child with the wing of a swan. Now, this is all going into the representation that, this child would be looked after on his journey. So the animals such as a bear, deer, an elk, and a boar were also associated with this burial. Both bodies had been sprinkled with red ochre. Now, this is really important because they did this in Egypt as well. All the mummies had red ochre on them. This is associated with death and the afterlife also. The presence of the swan's wing may suggest that even at this time, these people believed that the avian psychochomp ability of carrying the soul of the child into the other world. Transformed into swans were the children of the Lear, wearing golden chains around their necks, which allowed them to shift back and forth between human and avian forms. They are exiled. The golden chains end up being stolen from the boys' necks, and the girls must find their way to tell their father and save them from eternity in swan form. So then you can't become a human again, right? So you want to have that golden chain that connects you. I think it's almost like your lifeline, right? It's almost like when you're dreaming, they say there's a line, when you go into leave your body and stuff. You don't want to break that lifeline. Then you can get back to this world. So this, they're saying here also, the swan knight himself appears in a boat pulled by a swan with a golden chain around its neck to rescue a lady. The swan knight's name, Helios, is almost like Helios, right? And associated with the swan in reminiscence of solar deities. So there you go. It's a solar deity. So that's why Trump is sitting in that, picture with the swan. Yes, it's Cygnus. It's Cygnus for sure, the constellation Cygnus, but we have to understand the mythology behind it. And so he is the solar deity. He is the solar deity. It's Horus, it's Osiris, it's the Lion King, right? It says the solar deity for the fixed cross. Swans and geese were often thought of either carrying and embodying the souls of the dead in many cultures. The human soul may take on the form of bird after death, and likewise souls may be transported both into and out of this world by birds. Since migratory waterfowl, such as swans and geese, are known for the dramatic coming and going, they are potent symbols for the travel between worlds, particularly upper worlds, and require powers of flight to access. Birds of prey, prehistory, have been associated with death, the transmigration of the soul, and regeneration. Vultures in particular, since they played a critical role in the process of excarnation. So, they pick the body. Mark Brazil states in his paper, Swan Culture, that beliefs in the association between the soul, the swan, and death were already established during the Stone Age and left their echoes down the ages. The Germans considered the swan to be symbols of death. For the Irish, Slavs, and many Siberian tribes, it was considered taboo or a sin to harm swans for these and other reasons. Also linked was the famous swan song, right? It's your last breath upon death. Now we also see the picture here with the swan with the lyre. So it's tying into the 9 muses and the lyre again. So I'm trying to get to the 9 muses. Oh my God, I have so much information to go through. But I'm getting there because it all ties into frequency of your body. And this all ties into the 9 muses. So I'm slowly getting there, but I don't want to miss steps. So this is why this is taking so long to get there. I want to fill it all in so you really understand the symbolism of the swan and the lyre and Nemo's sin and all this. And I'm just going to try to piece it together slowly so you can kind of grasp what the symbol of this Melania's commercial with Trump saying, you know, oh, she's a goose, but it's really a swan, and he's as a swan. So they're telling us this is all about your soul. So this is all in Egyptian creation myths. Instead, speak of the cosmic goose called Ken-Ken-Wur. Now, you remember Barbie and Ken? The great crackler. The goose is associated with the earth god Geb. And although some say that it is called the Great Crackler due to his belief that Geb's laughter causes earthquakes, it also credited the laying of the cosmic egg from which came the world. It was also said that the cosmic goose created the world by breaking the internal silence of the universe with its call. Swans or geese also feature in Hindu mythology, where they are associated with the Brahma and his consort Saraswati, and are known as Hamsa. The swan goose of eternity is said to have laid the cosmic egg, or otherwise assisted Brahma in creating the cosmos. The swan here is linked to royalty, divinity, purity, knowledge, and enlightenment, as well as creative power. It is said to be the vehicle of the goddess Saraswati, patroness of wisdom, learning, music, and the arts. It always ties back to music and the lyre. Okay, so it's so fascinating. It's all about frequency, right? This is what Tesla said. The world's run by vibration and frequency. And it has to do with your ability to get out of here. Has to do with frequency and the music within you, the music of the spheres within you. So when I'm talking about getting out of here, I don't literally mean escapism. I mean connecting to the divine and having the ability to transform yourself to that divine energy, and then therefore like transmuting time. Okay, so you're not constantly stuck in this re-loop with your memory wiped. You want the Nemosin river, not the river left. Okay, so you want to be able to connect to your memory, so therefore you can be in this divine energy and enlightenment. So I was watching this other channel, and he was talking about the egg. And then he brought up Mork and Mindy. And of course, you know, Mork has the water alchemic symbol on his chest, the triangle. I used to watch this show. That's how old I am, okay? So anyhow, it's so fascinating that this all comes back to now, because, you know, he used to do this thing where he'd separate his fingers and go nanu nanu. Well, that's like worshiping the Anunnaki. You're calling the Anunnaki. And it really means the Shin Hebrew letter. That's what it also represents when you hold your hands like that. And that is the tarot card for judgment. Okay, so this is crazy. Like as a child, I was obsessed with this show. And I used to do the fingers and, you know, make my fingers go like that. I can still do it, right? So I just find this so amusing that the things we were really drawn to as children were like, in a way, trying to awaken us subconsciously to our true purpose, right? And understanding the universe. So I don't know, it's just crazy. And Happy Days and everything. He was on the show, and that was one of my favorite shows. So anyhow, going down memory lane here. The Celtic pagan festival, Samhain, which is Halloween, is one of the 4 Gaelic seasons, festivals. So this ties to October 31st, which is the time all around, the Osiris festival, right? It all ties into that end of October when the sun is in Virgo, actually, in sidereal astrology, and going through all those important places where the Spica star is, which is all tying into Washington, which is the Washington Monument, right? This is what the Freemasons said, that they built the Washington Monument over worshiping the Spica star. The story of Agnes and Ker, he found her at Loch, known as Loch of the Dragon Mouth. When Agnes arrived, there were 150 swans, and he had to choose Ker from amongst them. He chose correctly, then turned into a swan himself. It is said that they flew away together to the fortress Brú na Bowen, singing beautiful music that put all its listeners asleep for 3 days and 3 nights, almost like the resurrection time, right? So long may the swan reign in all its majesty and beauty. In Celtic hearts, this magnificent bird holds a special place. And they are considered special. The swan, of course, and also the geese. Like, I'm in Canada, and you're not allowed, to kill them. You have a specific time when you're allowed to hunt them, but they're very sacred birds. And there's something about them, like they just came back about a week ago, just before the equinox, and it's something about them returning. It's like, wow, they came back. It's like, oh my God, summer's coming, because the geese are back. So it's part of their traveling, and it makes sense that this is all, would be a great symbol for traveling from this world to the other world. In the narrative, Zeus, the supreme ancient god of Greece, had a love affair with Leto. Hera, who had been the spouse of Zeus, discovered what had happened and moved into a jealous rage. Leto had difficulty getting away from the furious wife. Finding she had refuge on an island of Delos, she had a tough delivery. Leto gave birth to the twins Artemis and Apollo. So sometimes she's named Leto, and other times she's named Leto. Swans are connected with the sun in addition to music. Apollo became a significant god. He was the god of light, arts, and particularly song and foretelling. The swan was sacred to Apollo. The 9 muses who encouraged imagination were all followers of Apollo. The swan is also connected with the 2 sisters. Now, they're saying in the other article, the 2 sisters, the other twins, the 2 sisters, sometimes they say that they're Pollux and Castor, but, they're also can be horses, but there also can be men. They're men, but one is immortal and one isn't. These are the twins in Gemini, right? So I guess, sometimes they're men and sometimes they're women, but the point is, it's the twin. Right? So the twins of Apollo and Artemis is the male and female, but both associated with the swan. So here we have an ancient portrait of Apollo and the muses at Mount Helicon. Now, this is why I'm really focusing on all this, is because of the muses and the music, right? And this all ties into Apollo. Now, Trump is Apollo, and you could say in the Bible, there's Apollyon. There's tons of songs. Apollyon, I think, was it Rush that did a song all with the lyrics of Apollyon in? Now, that is Apollo, right? So Apollo 13, in Trump's apartment, all, worshiping Apollo. So again, it's the sun god, but that's also Osiris. You see how it's layers and layers and layers of mythology, but they're all kind of worshiping the same thing. You have to understand he's not just one figure. He's many. He represents many, but obviously he's trying to represent the souls needing to transform. Even I don't care how much you hate this man or whether you don't have any opinion about him. He's just playing a role. He's playing a role. And whether you can see the symbolism and understand your history is up to you to retain your memory or reconnect to your memory. Reconnect with your ancestral memory, which is scientifically proven that it's in your DNA. And we also know that Artemis is tied to the moon. Now, there's this video game called Zelda that represents the moon and also the lyre. So you can see here the big moon in the background, and it's to do with the Majora mask. Now, the Majora mask is what this figure is wearing. He's almost like Quetzalcoatl. And then there's the moon. There's always the moon. And the moon is not nice in this video game. This is what I really do believe, that the moon represents the ship, or where the souls get recycled back and memory erased. The moon represents, that's part of the moon's representation. Remember, I showed you before, in Chinese mythology, the moon is called Sin, and they have a rabbit there making the elixir of life, right? So they're making the nectar of the gods on the moon. Well, what are they making it out of, right? So it's kind of funny. But the whole point is, it's not to fear the moon, it's just to understand that the moon represents regaining your memory, because it's tied to water and it pulls on the tides of the ocean. And so to regain your memory, you will escape from having to be recycled at the moon. So you can see the moon as, oh my God, it's evil, or you can see it as, oh my God, it's going to bring back my memory. But it doesn't matter. You shouldn't see it as bad or evil, like one or the other. It just understand that it has a huge role in this game of life. And here it's saying in this video game, who needs the earth? Get rid of it. That's what the moon is saying, right? So it's like they're depicting the moon as evil in this video game. And the Majora mask, which would be like Quetzalcoatl, says, you've met with a terrible fate, haven't you? And that's regarding to the moon again. There were, of course, other important myths because of the identification of the moon with the god Horus. The birth of Horus was celebrated on the second lunar day of the ancient Egyptian month of Parmuthi. Therefore, at Idfu, where it is stated that when he completes the half month, he assumes control of the sky, rejuvenated. The full moon could be equated with the adult Horus. At the moment of the full moon, Horus was declared true of voice and joyful. It's always to do with your voice and in your speech, because this is what's ruled by Mercury, okay? It's your voice is ruled by Mercury. It's I speak my truth. When you run the chakras the way the ancients did, which is Aries on top. Because of his victory over Seth in the divine tribunal of Heliopolis. Based on this theme, the lunar cycle was linked to the renewal of the royal powers of Karnak. So there it's saying, like, the moon is good, right? It's bringing your powers back. But it's really how you perceive it. It's really understanding it has a polarity, just like everything else in this realm. The opposition of the sun and moon in the sky on the 15th or 16th day of the month was the most important moment of the lunar cycle. This evidenced by inscriptions of temples of Edfu, Dinirda, and Karnak. The moment in time was known as uniting the two bulls. So the bull is the moon and the bull is the sun, and was described in the new kingdom of Osiris at Abydos. In later temples, there was a celebration with offering the two mirrors, symbolizing the two lights of this precise moment. The moment symbolized in rejuvenation of the sun god Amun-Ra. Another important lunar god, so lunar god, was Osiris, who may have only become identified with the moon as of the new kingdom. The murder of the god Osiris, he's always murdered, right? And his resurrection were recognized in the lunar cycle, and the body of Osiris was equated with the moon. In this myth, Osiris's body was cut into 14 parts of Set, where were later reassembled and restored to life. Here also, the number of parts of Osiris's body is equated with the days of the waning and the waxing of the moon. In other areas of Egypt, the entire life cycle of Osiris were related to the lunar cycle, with the god's conception on the first day and his birth on the second lunar day. At Karnak, the temples of Pet was actually dedicated to this event. Osiris's murder and subsequent dismemberment were associated with this period following the full moon. So it's to do with the full moon. This is why I wanted to bring this to you guys, okay? Because it has to align to these. The ritual has to align to these ancient rituals. Hence, the second day of the month saw the reassembly of the god's parts and his entering into the moon on the sixth day. Rejuvenation and the defeat of the god's enemies occurred on that day of the full moon, when Osiris was declared victorious in his tribunal and when Horus was awarded his heritage. There were other few gods with specific links to the moon, including Min, that's the one that had, the phalanx, and the Greek form of Isis. Goddesses were usually only associated with the moon when they were identified with the Eye of Ra. So it's always like, it's crazy. It's just always tying into the phases of the moon. So Edfu was Hathor's cult statue, was timed in accordance with the phases of the moon. So the moon, everybody's like, it's sun worship, it's Luciferism, and oh my God, it's like, it's just a balance between these two energies, the two pillars, the sun and the moon. It's really that. But the point is, I think the moon is almost more important to understand where it is in the sky than it is the sun, because it's moving so fast and it's changing all the time, its phases. So the understanding of the moon, and then this all ties to growing and the tides of the ocean. So you have to understand the moon, right? So now we have to see what's in the sky around Halloween at the end of October this year. And I've also kind of looked forward to other years ahead and seeing which ones really are matching these rituals more. And I honestly think this year is matching more precisely because Venus is on the dragon. And this is all tying into, the Game of Thrones, and then this Metropolis movie where she was on the dragon, Venus. So yeah, I think it's really important that Venus has to be on the dragon. But also there's this other aspect of her rising at the same time as Sirius on the heliacal rising at the end of July. So I'm looking all into that, and I want to show you guys all that. So if you've been following my channel, you know October 17th is the ritual for Osiris, right? The whole Murder of Osiris festival. Now, this year on October 20th, which is 3 days after, we have a full moon. The October full moon is known as the Hunter's Moon, the Blood Moon, or the Sanguine Moon. It has honoring of which has passed, and the plants and animals that gave their lives to sustain ours, and our ancestors who brought us into being and helped shape our world. So it's all about remembering our ancestors, this moon. Now, sanguine is a French word known as red chalk or red ochre. Okay, so this is all going back to the swan, and becoming immortal is to do with the October moon. Very important. Now, in Celtic tradition, this ruling planet of this time period is Persephone, veiled by the moon. I remember we discovered that in my last video or the one before, where we were talking about Persephone ties into the three goddesses and the moon. Now, this month is also ruled by Ivory, The symbol is the butterfly, which is all transformation, which is what they do at the Mardi Gras in New Orleans, where they're always dressed up as, you know, they're dying and then they transform to the butterfly. So this is really important, this moon in this time period. The butterfly, yeah, it's like all to do with transformation, yeah, and the hidden planet of Persephone. So yes, this is the time period. So this is all tying into the mythology and to what they're showing us in our present day. The monarch. The butterfly or the moth, which represents Ophiuchus, they say it's shaped like a moth. I think it's a doorway, but either way, they're putting the moth there. Now, it's always over the mouth, right? In the Silence of the Lambs, it was depicted over the mouth. And this is to do with your voice. If you don't have your voice, you won't be able to ascend. Your voice is what sets you free. When they say the term, the truth will set you free, it's I speak my truth. I speak my truth, so I am free. You're no longer part of the matrix. That's how you do it, is through your voice. If you're not speaking your truth, you're in fear because you don't want to be judged, and that's your ego. Right? So you have to speak your truth, whether you get likes or you dislikes or people don't want to speak to you anymore. It's not about others. It's about you standing in your truth. So speak your truth and be proud of it. It shouldn't be shunned to speak your truth. So not only is the October full moon, you know, tying into the red ochre, which is super important, right? All to do with ascension and immortality, we have in the Celtic tree year the animals that represent this time of the year, which is the end of October, is the swan, and the beginning of November, which is all tying into the Osiris festival, right? It runs from October 17th to November 3rd, which is when they have the election. It's the swan and the goose. Can you believe that? It's right there. It's right there in our history. And they're telling us the time of the year. Okay, that's the most important and to do with your soul. Now, is it going to be this year? To me, it's really aligning to this year because of the placement of Venus on Scorpio. And she has to ride the dragon, like in the Game of Thrones. So this is really why I'm thinking it's this year. If it's not, the other years are also quite symbolic as well, but we don't have the full moon on the right days. Okay, so this is why I think this year is really important, because the full moon is, we're kind of matching. There's also 2024, the full moon is kind of working in okay, and we can go into that more if nothing happens this year. I'll pull those years out and kind of look at them. But really, right now, it really seems significant to this year, everything that's in the sky. So this October 20th, 3 days after the beginning of Osiris's festival, the full moon, which all ties into the resurrection of Osiris, and this is ancient mythology, which I just explained, is on the hand of God, on the head of Sittus, which is, you know, Sleipnir's, Odin's horse. Okay, so it doesn't get any better. And then Osiris is right there, beside the moon. Now we just learned that Osiris is the moon. So the fact that there's a full moon and he's on the crown chakra for the cardinal cross, you know, and heaven planet is there, okay, Uranus. So I don't know, I can't see it being any more divine than that. And let's go look at other planets as well here. So Isis is just as important as Osiris, and it's kind of interesting if you take the word Isis and just take the R out, or put the R in, you have O or Isis, like Osiris and Isis are like or Isis. So it's kind of weird with the lettering. And now there's Trump's birthplace, is the Crab Nebula between the horns of Taurus, which is Isis's gate. Okay, it's the silver gate, and she's right there. She's almost in conjunction with his birthplace and in her gate. Also on October 20th on this red ochre moon. Doesn't get any better. So I know that Crab Nebula, you know, ties to the moon because it's a crab, and Cancer is the only constellation ruled by the moon. But I didn't know the nebula, when you're born on a nebula, the blindness, disease, accidents, fevers, quarrels, rape, murder, banishment, and decapitation links to that placement. Okay, so his actual birth is, you know, on a nebula that represents murder. So, I don't know. It just boggles my mind. This is all pre-planned, that he would incarnate back at that time, or are we just being told that he was born at that time? Who knows? All I know is the mythology is tying in to his birthplace, and it's all tying into this moon placement this fall. And we know Osiris's positioning on the founding of the United States was on the Washington Monument star, Spica, with Neptune on the Ascension star, Zavijava, on Virgo's left neck there, her shoulder. And then Saturn, the god of time, was in Virgo, the god of the Golden Age. This is when they founded the United States. So, and this also ties into Venus. I've explained that before with the transit in 1639, how they created all linking to that. Isis was in Sagittarius, which is where her star is, the Nunki star. This was all at the same time as the founding. The moon wasn't quite full on the founding date, but it was on a very significant placement on the tail of Capricorn, which is Enki's house, which is where the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction was this winter solstice. And this star is known as the Wheel of Fortune. Come on down, the price is right. Now I've mapped out here the winter triangle, which is Procyon, Sirius, and Betelgeuse. Okay, now we have Mnemosyne was right on the top of this pyramid, and above her was Heaven Planet in Isis's gate, the Silver Gate. This was all on the founding date. Now, Uranus will be in that position or close to the Pleiades on the shoulder of Taurus in 2024. Right now, he's in Aries in the crown chakra, right? So this is all very significant that they founded the United States on this time. And Mnemosyne, I keep telling you, it's very, very important, okay? She's the mother of the muses, and she's also returns your memory. Now, Mars was in the war position with Trump's birthplace on the founding of the United States. So there was war going on there, and then Venus and Jupiter were in Gemini, and so is the Sun on July 4th. And Mercury was just between Gemini and Cancer. But this is all very significant, so yeah, I just find it amazing that all this is all coming together. It's so divine. One of my subs named Terry keeps sending me stuff, and bless her heart, I do take the time to listen to most of it. This one video she sent me was a Christian saying that Sirius was Lucifer's star. And they were talking about how July 23rd is when, Sirius is on the heliacal rising in conjunction with the sun. It's not really conjunction, it's the heliacal rising coming at the same time. It's very bizarre. This is my birthday. Okay, so this is very, very important to understand why this time of the year is so important. It all ties into the dog days of summer and the Egyptian worship to the flooding of the Nile and the heat coming on in Egypt. Now, is Sirius Lucifer? No, I don't believe he's Lucifer. You can say, oh, he's the morning star. He's rising at the same time as the sun. Well, Venus is the morning star. Okay? Now, July 4th was the founding date. On the 23rd, which is the whole ritual to the Sirius star, which is the brightest star in the sky, which is also tying to sun worship, right? It's because it's coming up at this time in the sky with the sun. So the Sirius and sun, there's a connection. The morning star is Venus. So the year that they founded the United States, they took the morning star, which you could say is Jesus, or you could, try to make it seem like it's Lucifer. And this is what was happening in the sky. So that's why they created, the Washington, D.C., all to worship the spring triangle that is over the Washington, D.C. Around August, these dog days of summer. It's the end of July into, I think, August 13th or so. That this is really important time in the sky. Okay, so this is really fascinating. that Venus was in conjunction with the sun on the founding year in July. So 19 days later, after the founding date, which all ties in number 19, is the cycles of the moon, right? The moon returns in the same position 19 years later. Now, Shambhala is the heaven star. The moon was on that star at the bottom of Virgo, and Saturn was there as well. Yeah, a few hours earlier in the day, on July 23rd, the moon was closer to Spica and then moves pretty fast, right? And Osiris is there, like still, because it doesn't move very fast. So on July 4th it was there, and it's just shifted a little bit, and Saturn's still there. It's a bit annoying that Stellarium won't let me pull them all up at the same time. And then Juno is in the belly, right? That's the triad with Jupiter and Minerva for the Capitoline Hill triad. So this is why they called also the Capitol Hill. It's all to do with these planets, okay? So it's amazing that, it's all ties in so beautifully in the sky. Hopefully you have the opportunity to go out and look at the sky if you have a nice sky with not too much light blocking out the stars on March 21st, which is actually tomorrow. You can see Orion really clearly in the sky right now, like early in the evening. It's really like so huge. And I always love looking at Orion because just off to the right hand side at the upper star there, you can kind of find the Pleiades, and you can really see them. The moon right now is in Taurus right there, so they're kind of blocked out because the moon's a little bit bright, but another day or two you'll be able to really see the Pleiades. So I hope you have the opportunity to go do that because in the summer you don't get to see that, right? Orion's like below the ground at night. One of my other subs sent me this. I hadn't watched the Grammys, and it's all about Noah Cyrus's having a gravity-defying moment at the Grammys because of her dress. Now, that was the headline used in many different outlets. So obviously they're trying to, the gravity defying, like you you don't want to float, and she's being raptured in this raptured dress. So yeah, you don't want to be gravity defying. I really don't think this is the correct path, and I think it's a bit of a psyop to think that floating up into the sky to a ship is going to be your savior. What's going to happen when you get there, even if it's just symbolically? Like, you have no power. You're there. And I don't think God is only in the sky that you've been told is evil. I think God is everywhere, and God's within us, and it's in all the frequency and energy, and you have to connect to it by opening your heart and opening your mind, and therefore you are with God just by doing that. Okay, so being on that higher frequency. But again, polarity. Her dress is very similar to a swan. So, are they doing like a polarity in just the symbolism there? One is, gravity defying, that you're being raptured, and then the other one is, do you take the swan path and regain your memory and become connected to God and to the other worlds and have this memory return? So, yeah, it's really fascinating to look at the symbolism when you start to really understand what has been used through history and really understand the meaning of what you're watching, because it's everywhere, the symbolism. It's insane. Any show you watch, it's so loaded right now for this topic. It's nuts. The whole drama with the royal family, I think it was all like scripted. It's just a distraction, and I just found this tweet by Pierre Morgan really quite interesting, and it's a clock tick-tock, They're just playing roles, and it's just, for the masses to be entertained and work through their emotions, They have to work through their division and hate, and, and I think people in general are quite quiet now on social media. Like, everybody's like, ooh, you don't see too many people posting much these days. I think everybody's in their and walking through their desert a little bit right now. They don't know what the heck's going on. I was watching this other video, I'll drop the link, and it was to do with the DNA and the top-down view of all the different DNA. And this one on the right is called the Z DNA, And it's really fascinating because it ends up being like, you know, the Star of David. It has the six points on it, which is really beautiful. It's just, I find, you know, it's just, it's this, I don't know. It's just, to me, it's all divine, you know, what's going on. And, you know, we can't help these people if they don't want to help themselves. You can just put the information out there, speak your voice, speak your truth for you, and then you've done your part. Okay, you don't have to convince people to think like you. You just have to be able to speak your voice and then just let it go and just, you know, say I've done my part. And here it is matching the Star of David. It's really, really amazing. I can't believe we're living through this. It's just mind-boggling. And I'll keep sharing because I still have lots to share. We've got to get to all the 9 muses and all that. And just keep staying in bliss, guys. Stay in bliss. It's really important. Sing your song.